Welcome to Shas Illuminated. Please enjoy the following shiur.
We are beginning tonight's shiur in Siman Shincha Beis. We are up to Siv Daled, page Kuf Nun Beis. We are about to turn on to page 304. It was pointed out that we left a Mishnah Brura out last night. We explained it outside, we didn't read it inside. But in order to have a hashlama, let's just go back to Siv Beis for a moment, where we saw in the Mechaber Shabbos after Yontif, or Shabbos before Yontif. We said Noldo Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. The Mishnah Brura says in Sivkot and Daled, Hatam, the reason is the Imno Chlena Havi Kemechin Miyom Echad L'Chavero V'Aser. If one would eat it on Shabbos after Yontif, or Yontif after Shabbos, it would be like a case of Hachana from one day of Kedusha to another, like we learned in the beginning of the Siman in Sivkot and Aleph. Umemela Keved L'Chazer L'Achila. Memela, since it's not fit for eating, Aser Gam Kem Total, it also is not allowed to be moved. It is Muktzah. And now beginning tonight's material in Siv Daled, the second to last line, the Mechaber tells us, Ochle behema, animal food. Ein bohem mishum tikun keli, there is no problem, there is no isser of tikun kli, of fashioning a vessel. Lefikach mutter liktom afilu bisakin kash oteven velachzos boshinov. Therefore one is allowed to cut, even with a knife, some straw or stubble in order to use it to pick his teeth. Because there's no issue of making a kli out of the straw or stubble, which is the animal food. Aval kesam she'ena ochel behema, but a stam wood chip which is not fit for consumption for an animal, afilu litlo kedei lasas boshinov aser. Even to move it in order to pick something out of your teeth is forbidden. Now the Mishnah Brura begins in Sivkot Tes, but before we read the Mishnah Brura, I just want to point out a note in the back of the Sefer that you do not have to turn to, just a very quick note, a one-liner, and that is when it discusses halacha in terms of animal food, but the Minchas Chino tells us that by human food, kol shekein she'en behem mishum tikun kli. So whatever we're going to say about animal food would certainly apply to food that is fit for human consumption. And now we'll explain it in all its details in Sivkot and Tes. Achlei behema. Rotzalomar davar sheroi la'achila lebehema. It means to say something that is fit for eating by an animal. Umashma begemara dafilu ein omed b'shvila. It's mashma from the Gemara, even if this particular thing is not necessarily omed that an animal is going to eat it, kigon eitzim rakim sheroi lehem la'achila, like soft wood that's fit for them to eat, gam kein lo miskarya aleim shem kli. It also will not get upon it a shem kli. There will be no problem with tikkun kli. It doesn't have to be that an animal is actually going to eat it, just that it is fit for animal consumption. There is no isser of tikkun kli sivkot and yud. Umutter af betiltel memela, it is mutter to be moved. The davar haray la'achila muchonu l'chalat tzarich. Anything that is fit for consumption, even by animals, is considered prepared for all its needs, and therefore it would not be muktzah. And therefore the example the Mechaber gave us is you would be allowed to cut with a knife some straw or stubble to use the resulting piece to pick your teeth. Says the Mishnah Brura, Sekatan Yud Aleph V'yesh Sovrim De Dafka Kigon Zeh. There are those who hold that is dafka like this scenario, sha'osa mimenu kli batchila, that you're making a new vessel out of the animal food, then it's lo shaya tikun kli. Then it's not shaya to the whole parsha of fixing and fashioning a vessel. Aval im misakin kli ha'asu ikfar b'dvar ochel. But if you're fixing up an already made kli with a food item, kigon sheyesh nekev b'kli, for example, you have a regular kli, you have a pot, and there's a hole in the pot, v'nota chatichas lefesh, you take a piece of a turnip, v'chotcho lefi midas hanekev, and you cut it according to the size of the hole, in order to stuff it with that piece of lefes, shayach bazeh tikun keli, then there would be shayachas to the isra of tikun kli. So only fashioning a kli from a piece of food, when the food itself is becoming the kli, that's where it's mutter. But to use food to fix up a regular existing kli, that would be included in the isra of tikun kli. That's the Ran. V'tiko b'chai odom, v'ay b'nishmas odom, d'ledidei yesh b'zeh chiyav chatos. This could even be an isra daraisa, which would be chai v'chatos. So again, we said you can't take animal food and fashion it into a kli, and there is no isser. And the example was you could take some straw or stubble, which is fit for animal consumption, and you can cut it even with a knife to use it to pick your teeth. So the Mishnah Brura begins in the last line on Kufnan Beis of Katan Yud Beis, afilu besakin, even with a knife, va'afilu hu makbid al hamida, even if he's makbid on the size of the cuts that he's going to make in this animal food, ein bazeh mishum chash iser machmas mechatech. There still would be no iser of mechatech, which we will discuss later tonight in the shiur of cutting things down to size. There is no isser over here. By cutting the shra and stubble to pick your teeth, there will be no isser mechatech kevan dedvar ochahu, since it is food, and there is no mechatech when it comes to food items. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter in Sivkoton Yud Gimel. Then the Mechaber told us, after he said that by animal food there is no problem of tikkun kli, but something that's not fit for animal food, like a kesem, like a wood chip, then even to move it, to take it, to pick your teeth, would be aser. So the Mishnah Berurah writes in Sivkoton Yud Gimel, Ratzalom means to say, afilu netila stam beli katima aser mishum mukta kishar eitzim. What the Mechaber means to say, even to move it, stam, without cutting it at all, is aser because it is muktzah like all other wood. The kol shekain em yirtza lekotmo kedei lachtos boshinav the aser mishum shvus. Certainly if your goal in moving it is to then cut it in order to use it as a toothpick, that will be aser because of a shvus to hu ke'ein tikkun keli, that is similar to a tikkun keli. V'tafta imichtemenu biyad. This is dafka if you're going to cut it with your hands. That's when it's only going to be a shvus, aser derabanan. The oz potter mechatos. That's when you're going to be potter from mechatos. It will not be daraisa. Mishum dihi malacha kela'achar yod. Then it's like doing it with a shinui, cutting with your hands. V'aser mishum shvus, and it will only be forbidden midirabanan kimoshik asavnu. Avol im yiktemenu bikli. But if you're going to cut this piece of wood with a vessel, kedei lachtos bo shinav, in order to use the piece that you're going to cut to pick your teeth, olif da bo adela, so you're going to use it to open a door, ozi malacha gemura, that would be a malacha gemura da'araisa, shemashveyu kli al yedei zevachayev. Because then you're actually fashioning a kli in the normal way by using another kli to make a kli, and then you will be chayiv da'araisa. So there's an issue here of stam, just muktzah, and then there's an additional issue if you're going to cut it, of fashioning a kli. If you use your hand, it's the rabbanon. If you use a vessel, it's da'araisa. What about using a match to pick one's teeth? So if you look at note 16, he brings down a machlokas. Velachtos eshinav b'gafror. Can one pick his teeth and move a match on Shabbos? So kosav athilu david sheyitachin shemuter. It's logical that it should be permissible. Kevan shelachora nechshav hagafror kekli shemlatul iser. L'chora, a match would be donned up like muktzah, but a lenient muktzah of a kli shemlatul iser. That you are allowed to move it if you need it for a permissible use, which picking your teeth is. V'hosev, and he adds on, he adds on also that it's logical there will be no isser because of any concern that you might come to break it further. Because since it is designated for a specific use, v'yesh olav toras kli, and it has a din of a kli on it, and by a kli we're not worried you might come to break it into a smaller piece. That is the opinion that says it is mutter. The Rav Tzion also writes that it's mutter. Me'idach, on the other hand, l'das lagono shel mazav arbach yesh lochush shedin hagafrur kedin eitzim ha'umdim la'asaka b'lvad. A match has the same din as a piece of wood that's waiting to go into the fire. Va'asr lasas bo ashinav. It has a more serious status than a kli shemlatul iser. It's muktzah machmas atzmo. It's a more serious iser, like a regular piece of wood, and therefore Shlomo Zalman says that you cannot move a match to pick your teeth. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, Sivkoton Yodalot, again, we said to move the piece of wood in order to use it as a toothpick, that was aser. The afti yesh bazem mishum kavod abrios. Lamaisa, there's a problem here of kavod abrios. Shepa'amim shenira habasar shebein hashinayim lachutz ugnayhu lo. Sometimes a person has a piece of meat stuck between their teeth, and people see it, and it's a disgrace to the person, so it's a matter of kavod abrios over here. Afal pikein aser. Still says the Mishnah Berurah, it is aser to move the wood, even to bring it to pick your teeth, to save yourself from embarrassment and kavod abrios. Why? You knew you were having sudas tomorrow, and therefore you should have prepared your toothpicks from before the suda, and therefore kavod abrios is not grounds to override the Isser Muktzah. Ulefiza, according to this, in his Zmino Chaveru L'Suda B'Shabbos, if a person was invited out for the Suda on Shabbos, V'lohoya Esher L'Lahachin Shum Davar Me'esmo Lasas B'Shinov, and therefore he didn't have a chance to prepare a toothpick for himself in that location where he was going at his friend's house, so Memelu Mutter Lo L'Taltal Kesem Lasas B'Shinov Imein Lo Davar Acher. then he would be allowed to move a piece of wood in order to pick his teeth if he has nothing else, because there we don't say that he should have taken care of it from yesterday. But if it's not really so bad, it wouldn't be a genai, then it would be aser. The whole heter is covered abrios. You have no way to prepare before Shabbos, and right now it's embarrassing. You have something sticking out of your teeth. You have no toothpick, and therefore you would be allowed to take the piece of wood and use it for that purpose. Says the Mechaber weiter in Sif Hey, Mutter letaltal atzei v'somim lahariach behem ulahonef behem l'chola. A person could take nice smelling wood, atzei v'somim, to smell them, or to wave them in front of a sick person. Umololo lahariach bo. You could roll it in your hands in order to make the smell come out stronger. Echad koshim ve'echad rakim. This is whether these atzei v'somim are hard pieces of wood or they are soft pieces of wood. All of it is mutter. You can move it, to smell it, to wave it in front of a chola, and you can roll in your hands to bring out the smell a little bit more. Says the Mishabura in Sif Koton Tesvav, mutter l'taltal, you are allowed to move it. The lo makta daite me'elu ha'etzim me'kara, because you never put these eitzim out of your mind, because you might want to smell them on Shabbos, and therefore they are not muktzah. We said you're allowed to move it both to smell yourself or to wave in front of a chola. The Mishabura says in Tezayim, hu adin lebari, you could also wave it in front of a healthy person. Ela urcha de milsanokat, it's just mentioning the more common occurrence that it was more normal to be waving the besamim in front of someone who's not feeling well. Sefkatan Yudzayin, we also said you could be mololo la riachbo. Says the Mishabura, tzarach lomar vikotmo umololo. Really what the Mechaber wants to say is you can cut it and you can roll it in your hands. Umalila hainu, what is malila? Shemolo beinas ba'osav, that you're rolling it between your fingers, kadei lahotzi reicho, in order to bring out the smell. Uketimanami mishum zeh, and the cutting is also to bring out the smell. Shemikoma katima hulach v'reicho nodef, because when you cut a piece of wood that smells nice, so the place where you cut it is moist, and therefore it smells nice. So you're allowed to either cut it or roll it in your hands in order to bring out the smell. V'skimu harbe achronim, and many achronim agree, the hada mutter liktom bakoshim, that which we say you are allowed to cut these hard pieces of nice smelling wood, hainu davka biyod avalo bekli, that would davka be with your hands and not with a vessel. In Sivkatan Tesvav, he just points out in the Shar Tzion, ubirakim mutter af bekli. He's medayik, the Mishabura says over here, the Achronim agree that which we allow you to cut the hard pieces of wood that smell nice is dafka biyad avalo bekli. Ubirakim mutter af bekli. Says the Shar Tzion, but the soft pieces of wood are mutter to cut even with the vessel, the heim bechlal ochloi behema. Because soft pieces of wood are edible for animals, and therefore they get the din of ochloi behema. Umitam zeh af lachtzos boshina of mutter birakin. And therefore, for that reason, like we learned in the last sif, you would be allowed to cut it, to pick your teeth with it as well, when they are soft, and therefore they're fit for animals, like we just learned. So back to the Mishabura, we're talking about the hard pieces of wood which are not fit for animal consumption. You're allowed to cut it, but only with your hand, not with a kli. After kotem rak kedei lahariach, even though you're only cutting it in order to get the smell, the eino mechavin klal la'asosa keli, and your kavana is not at all to make it into a kli, still it is usher to use a kli to cut it. You have to use your hands to cut it. Ulakach osir likto mahadas besakin. Therefore, one would not be allowed to cut a hadas on Shabbos with a knife. Gizeira dilma osi liktom lachsos boshinov. It's a gzeira, even though he's cutting the hadas to bring out the smell, but you can't cut the hadas with a knife to bring out the smell. Gzeira, you might come to cut the hadas to pick your teeth with it. Ubazeh chayev, that would be an issa daraisa. The kanabas of katan yugimel, like we just learned above in katan yugimel, because that would be making a kli. Va'afilu biyod eino mutter liktom bakashen rak lahariach. And even when you're using your hand, and we said it's okay, that's only okay if you are breaking it with your hands in order to smell it. But if you're breaking it even with your hands in order to pick your teeth, that would at least be asr midrabanan according to everyone. The Mishabura says, this din applies of cutting it or rolling it, whether they were hard pieces of wood that smell nice or soft pieces of wood. Says the Mishabura, Echa Koshem Hainu Afilu Koshem She'enam Ru'im Klal L'Machal Behema, like we pointed out before in the Shar Tzion, even hard pieces of wood that are not fit at all for animal consumption, Afilu Hachi Mutter L'Kotbam U'Lefasheach Behem Koma Sheyurtza. Still, it is mutter to cut them or to split them open as much as you want. Vein sheposheach eitz gadol or cut them, whether you're cutting open a big piece of wood or a small piece of wood. V'davka b'chol zeh shehu rak lahosif reach al yedei hamalila v'akatima. All this is only permissible because you're trying to bring out the smell by rolling it in your hands or by cutting it. Aval aser laholid reach. But it is aser to bring out a new smell, kigon lahaniach b'samim b'beged v'kadome, like placing spices on a garment or something similar. Kedei sheyeh habeged meiriach aser. You're doing it in order to have the garment now smell nice. It wasn't smelling nice, and you want to put spices to bring out a new smell into the garment. That would be aser. If you look at note number 19, he says, what is the iser laholid reach of creating a new smell, like putting on the garment? Ubetama iser laholid reach. The reason for this iser of creating a new smell, we see later on, shu mipnei shaholedes davar chodosh krova la'asiyas malacha. Just creating anything new is like doing a malacha, and therefore it is aser. Ula kamon kasav, later on as well, the Mishabura gives a different svara. Shaholedes reach bebeged nechsheves ketikun kli. He says over there that creating a smell in a garment is considered like fixing the kli, and there is an iser of tikun kli. Now this idea of putting spices on a garment to create a smell, which is aser, we'll read a little bit of note number 20. It's a very large note, but we'll read a little bit of it. The af beged sheyesh bo kfar reach, even a garment that already has a good smell. V'rotza lahosif bo reach nosav. You want to add more geschmack smell to it. Kasav lekamon sha'aser lasos kain. That is also forbidden. It doesn't have to be that you're going from a bad smell to a good smell. Even from a good smell to a stronger good smell is aser. Umikol makom, however, Mi shahaya esrog munat bebigda, one who had an esrog wrapped in his garment, v'notlo mimenu, when he unwrapped it, kasav sham shemuter la'asir lebeged. The Mishavura says you are allowed to put the esrog back in the garment, l'fi she'eno mosef reach ala reach hakayim. It's not adding any smell, it's just putting it back where it was. The smell is remaining there. That would not be included in the first thing he said, that adding an additional smell would be aser. Returning the esrog would be okay. The af laholid bebeged reach ra, even to put on a garment a bad smell. Kagon liten bo chomer hamavriach yatushim. You want to spray a garment, a place on a garment, something that will scare away the mosquitoes. So Rav Vosner says that it's aser elim kain hareach cholosh, unless it is a very weak smell, ukimat she'enu murgash, and you barely feel it. Shabazeh efsher sheyesh l'hakel. In that case, it's possible that you can be lenient. V'chein laholid reach b'mayim. So too, if you want to create a smell in water, we're going to see later on that that's aser. V'lishboch shemach reichani l'toch mayim, to pour a nice smelling oil into water. We learned earlier shaladas atazah magen Avram, it's aser. Mishum shemoa b'hem reach. You're now creating a reach in water, which is aser. But odas al yirabah v'achacham tzvi, it's mutter. Why? Kevan she'ein hashemen molid reach b'mayim. By pouring nice smelling oil into water, you're not creating a new smell in the water. It's the oil in the water bringing up the smell. So it's not the water that smells, it's the oil in the water that smells. You're not creating a new smell, and therefore they say it's mutter. That's machlokas. However, to place water that has mixed with it some nice smelling oil onto your hands, therefore sure you can be lenient like those shittas that are lenient before. Even though you're creating a smell in your hands. The reason for this heter is, says the Rabba, again, it's not the shemen that's creating a smell in the hands. The smell is from the shemen itself, that's attached to the hands. So it's not, again, same idea we said before. You're not creating a new smell in the water, just the oil's in the water, so now it smells from the oil. When you put that mixture on your hands, so again, the oil is smelling from your hands, but it's not your hands that get the smell. The Ginas Radhan says another heter of creating a smell on the body, and that is that smells on the body do not last. So the sweat knocks it away, and a smell on the body is not long lasting, and therefore it's mutter. The smell in the hands, he gives another reason to be matir, because hands are very busy, they're always moving around, and therefore the smell dissipates even faster on the hand than the rest of the body. A few more lines. So too, to use mouthwash, the Shevet HaLevi writes, you're allowed to use mouthwash on Shabbos. Because you're allowed to create a smell in the body. But to mix the mouthwash with some water, to then use it in your mouth, Kasa sha'asa, that's asur b'bnei shevakach molad re'al b'mayim, because there you have a problem of creating the smell in the water. So that's why it's a problem. Me'idach, on the other hand, Shlomo Zalman says, Shem lo heichin mei peh. If you didn't prepare, I guess it's like a stronger mouthwash that you can't use. You're diluting it in order to use it. If you didn't prepare the mouthwash before Shabbos, yesh lahakel la'arvam b'mayim, you can be mekel to mix the stronger mouthwash with the water. Mipnei shematara sa'erev eina litem b'hem reach. Your kavanah is not to create a smell. El l'dalalam k'dei shiu berichos namuch yoser. You're just trying to dilute it so it's not so strong, so you can use it for your mouth. Let's go back to the Mishabura now. We are 6 lines up from the end of the skinny lines in the middle of Sivkot and Yud Ches. And now the Mishabura totally switches gears and brings us back to Mechatech, which we had in Sif Dalud. The Agav da Irinan b'Shulchan Aruch le'inyan chituch uketima b'inyan achle behemav atzei b'samim. Once we're on the topic in the Mechaber about cutting different types of animal food or atzei b'samim, natik nami bazeh din melechas mechatech b'shar dvarim. I'd like to speak a little bit about the rules of mechatech, of cutting to size, v'gabe other inyanim. Aleph, rule number 1, ha-mechatech or kol davar she'adam mechatech, cutting skins or leathers, or anything else that a person normally cuts, u'makbid al midaso, and a person is makbid on the size, ben eitz o mateches, whether it's wood or metal, or afilu noto shalof, even if it's feathers of a bird. Kevan shem makbid al midas arko v'rochbo, since the person is makbid on the length and the width, v'chote b'kavona, and he's cutting with intention, chayiv. That is going to be an Isser D'Oraisa. Avo, but, hachote derech hefsed, a person is cutting something in a destructive manner. O below kavana l'midaso, or he's not paying attention to the size at all. Elo kimisasik, he's not doing it as misasik, o kimisachik, or he's just playing games, then he is potter. He will not be, it's not Isser D'Oraisa. Umayafe ho'ilu lanu hanavim, and how wonderful it is that the Nevi'im helped us out, v'chachamenu zal ha'chachamim, b'amesh sha'asru lanu ha'mikach u'mimkar b'Shabbos, that they asked, what a chesed they did by asking business for us on Shabbos. She'pa'omim she'yachol lovu udei chiyuv chatas, that they allowed business on Shabbos, and you own the hardware store, or many other stores, you may come to the Isser D'Oraisa of Mechatech, kigon she'mocher eiz eschora. For example, if you sell a certain merchandise, Mechatech mimenu lufi midaso atzarachon, you're going to cut it down to size based on what the customer needs. The chayim mishum Mechatech, what a chesed that we can't do business, saves us from many yisurim, one of which is the Isra Mechatech. That's rule number 1, that Mechatech of anything down to size, the kavana would be an Isra D'Oraisa. Beis, number 2. Ein melechas mechatech shayach ba'acholin. Mechatech does not apply by foods. K'moshe gasanu l'elbis of cotton yudays, like we said tonight in the beginning of the shiur, that when it comes to food, there is no isra mechatech, that's human food or even animal food, as we saw before. And gimel number 3 is, in meleches mechatech hu dafka b'kliya afilu b'yad. Is the isra mechatech cutting dafka with a vessel, with a utensil, or is it even cutting with your hand? Ayin b'mashik asana l'bir halacha, look what we wrote in the bir halacha, which he summarizes right here in the Mishabura for us. The talui b'chol davar lefi anyanu. It depends on each item. The davar shedako lechatcho davka b'kli, something that's normally only cut with a kli, ein chayev ki'im b'kli. You're only going to be chayev mechatech if you cut it with a kli. The davar shedako la'afrido b'yad, something that's normally cut with your hands, chayev gam kein afilu b'yad. You will be chayev for mechatech even if you cut it by hand. But it's logical that even something that you normally cut with a kli and you cut it with your hand, it would be at least aser midrabanan. Of one who cuts a wood chip with a knife in order to pick his teeth, according to Rosh, he is chayev because of fashioning a vessel. According to the Rambam, he's chayev for cutting out the size. He's chayev is the rice of mechatech. The efsher the chayev l'didei shnayim, and it could be that according to the Rambam, you actually be chayev 2 things. There are 2 interesting notes that I want to do, so I'm going to go with one that I like a little better, but they're both geschmack. If we don't get to 25, it's kedai to see. But we're going to go to the back of the Sefer, I believe, and look at note number 23. Note number 23, and we've discussed this many times, but it's a geschmaka machlokas and a very nogea machlokas to many inyanim between Rav Yoshev and Shlomo Zalman. If you look at note 23 in the back on page 58, he writes, V'chein liftoach bakbuk al yidei hafradas hapekak me'ataba shebetachtiso b'mokom hamiyuad l'chitoch. Opening up a soda bottle where there's a round ring that's over there, and by opening the bottle, you are separating the bottle cap from the ring. Rav Elyashiv says, she'asur mishum mechatech. That is an isser of mechatech, or cutting down to size. Kevan shebechitu chatabas nasa pekak noach l'shimush. Since by cutting off the ring, that smooth cut, you are making the cap easier to use. V'osiv, and he adds on, sha'av she'yitachin she'en bazeh mishum isser daraisa, even though there should not be an isser daraisa, mikom makom isser derabanan vaday sheyesh bekach, it's for sure asr miderabanan. V'chein das Rav Vosner shemistaber lahachmir shelo levtoch pekakim ka'elu b'Shabbos, that you should not open these caps on Shabbos. Hein mishum mechatech, both because of mechatech, like we're discussing over here. Hein mishum chash makav patesh, also because of the chash of finishing up a kli, because you're finishing off the bottle cap and making it a usable kli. And Agon of Nissen Krell says, "Stapik shema asra adavim Torah." Nissen Krell says maybe it's even asra daraisa. Mishum shechitu chapekak nasa b'mokum shekava hayotzer shuatov v'yoser l'chituch. Because when you open the cap, it's being done in a place where the creators of the cap made it better and easier to open. There's those kadesha roya pekak l'shimush, and they did that way so you could reuse the cap over and over. Umishum kach nershav aposech kemakber al hamida, and therefore it makes it that the person who's opening it, it's like he's makber on the midah, and therefore he is chayav pasal b'daraisa for mechatech. This applies to many other questions that we discussed. Separating two leavens, according to them, it will be asr midaraisa. Tearing toilet paper where it's perforated, if one does not have torn toilet paper on Shabbos, would be a serious isra of mechatech. All these things, Rav Elyashiv and those with him are machmir. But let's skip to the more lenient shita. On the next column, the second paragraph, me'idach, on the other hand, das agonu shomazam orbach, shechituch pekak habakbuk v'afredoso me'atabash shetatav eino bichlal mechatech. Says Rav Shomazam, it's mutter. Opening a bottle cap is not a problem of mechatech. Kevan shetam chitucho b'mokom zeh. The reason is because you're cutting the bottle cap in this place. Eino mishum shemu unyon sheyat pekak dafka b'midah zu. It's not because you just love having bottle caps that are exactly that size. You just love having your bottle caps that size. Elo mishum sheb'mokom zeh psicha nocha yoser. It's just easier. The fact that the company made it that way, it says easier to open that way. You don't care in the size. You're just doing it that way because they made it easier. And therefore, he says that's not mechatech. Mechatech is when you're makber al midah. You want to dafka that midah. The other poskim say you are makber on that midah. Since the company made it that way, you want it that way because now it's easier to use. They say I don't care how the bottle cap is. I want my soda open. The fact that the company made it that way just makes it easier to open. It's not that I'm makber on the size, and therefore Shlomo Zalman says there's mutter. V'chein kriyas arizos upsicha sakios mozon b'mokom hamasumun lakal. So too, opening anything else, any kind of bag or container that's marked for the opening on the perforations, kosav sham shemuteres mitam zeh, there would be no isser of mechatech. And for that reason, he also says that if a person is stuck in the bathroom and he has no toilet paper and he has to tear with the shinui the toilet paper that's there, he does not have to be makbid not to tear on the perforations because he doesn't care anyway. It's only mechatech chonor shalom zaman. If you're makbid on the midah, a person who's in the bathroom and needs toilet paper is not makbid that it should be exactly 2 squares. He doesn't care. It just might rip as 2 squares because it's easier that way. The company made it that way. That is not an isra of mechatech, and so too when you separate the leavens, you're not makbid. It should be a clean cut exactly between your 2 leavens, and therefore it also would be mutter according to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. We will stop here and continue with Sevav and Mirz Hashem tomorrow.
You have been listening to a shiur from shasilluminated.org. For other shiurim on many topics, or to hear an Iyun shiur on any daf in Shas, including Ma'ar Mekaymas on each shiur, please visit www.shasilluminated.org. To order CDs or for more information, please call 203-312-SHAS. That's 203-312-7427, or email info@shasilluminated.org.